Honorable Mayor Ramil L. Hintugaya, to our BOT Chairperson, Vice Mayor Joanna Eileen Hintugaya, to the Academic Program Head of the Teacher Education, Dr. Karen Chaser Makiling, to our moderators, to the FS teachers and advisor, Sir Venji Doydoy and Sir Erap Ordeneza, to our students, education students, and of course to our invited plenary or resource speaker, Dr. Lim, maayong buntag kanatong tanan. Field study subject is an important program for pre-service education students. Though these students will be provided an opportunity to apply previous knowledge, view real examples, and chance to be involved physically with real situations in the field. All of this promotes a deeper understanding of the subject being studied and improved ability to recall the information and experiences later as needed. Challenging to know that the pandemic has profoundly altered the education modality and that the delivery of instruction in all levels is affected. More than ever of the paramount importance, direct and concrete experiences should be given to pre-service teachers to appreciate actual classroom and school environment setting. So it is the hope of the institution to provide learning opportunities to the students without putting their safety, your safety, and health into risk. As such, to provide direct, purposeful experiences to the learners, we decided to conduct this webinar series for the field study 1 and 2. And in fact, you started this in October 26, 2021. Today, it is our webinar series number 10, which is all about the fundamentals of action research. So the objectives of this webinar is to comply, of course, the requirement of the Commission on Higher Education in integrating action research in Field Study 1 and 2. Second, to provide the fundamentals of action research to pre-service teachers. Third, to enrich the knowledge of students in writing research papers, especially action research. Because right now, the Department of Education teachers are very active in conducting an action research and basic research. In fact, last week, together with our plenary speaker, we attended the research congress in Region 11, no? And of course, to prepare students to be ready in their professional and intellectual undertakings. So today we are very lucky and blessed to have with us a good friend of mine, which will be introduced later by our host, si Dr. Rex Lim. So I hope that today, even that we are experiencing bad weather and also bad internet connection, you will still enjoy, and at the same time you will still learn. I know you will learn many things about research today with our plenary speaker. So again, welcome to this webinar series number 10, and learn and learn so that you can apply this in writing your researches this time. So God bless us all and mag-amping tang tanan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gary P. Lagatsera, LP, our college president, for that warm welcome to our students. All right? Research has been an integral part of higher education. Simply put, research is the process of discovering new knowledge. This knowledge can be either the development of new concepts or the advancement of existing knowledge and theories, leading to a new understanding that was not previously known. As a student, it is also your inherent task to contribute to the discovery of new knowledge and to address issues present in the community. Although you are almost done with your research conduct, but I know today's discussion will provide insights that can help improve your research undertaking. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we are honored and privileged to have with us virtually an expert in the field of research. Thus, let me introduce to you our guest speaker for this morning. He is a full-time senior high school faculty at the Davao City National High School Department of Education, Davao City, Philippines, where he teaches qualitative and quantitative research subjects. He is also a part-time graduate school professor at the University of Immaculate Conception and an adjunct college lecturer at Christian Colleges of Southeast Asia, Davao City, Philippines. Our speaker for this morning holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Education, major in Applied Linguistics, and Master of Arts in Language Teaching, major in English at the University of the Immaculate Conception and at the University of Southeastern Philippines, respectively. He has been actively involved in national and international research training and workshops in quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods research. He has been invited as a speaker to local, national, and international webinar sessions talking about language and linguistics, research methodologies, qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods, research writing, literature review writing, and emerging teaching pedagogies in English and research. His recent plenary talk was on the 9th Global Virtual Conference on Multidisciplinary Trends in Academic Research last July 23 to 25, 2021. Our speaker this morning has also been invited as an oral examiner to various international research conferences. His recent invitation as a session judge was with the second Asian Virtual Multidisciplinary Research Conference on April 4 to 16, 2021. He is also currently an active peer reviewer of the International Journal of Linguistics, ISSN 1948-5425, MacroThink Institute, and a member of the Philippine Association of Researchers and Statistical Software Users and Mixed Methods International Research Organization, to name a few. His ongoing international research paper collaboration is on the scoping technique of mandatory professional development programs across the country with Dr. Dennis Alonso, the Program Director, School of Education, University of New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. Our speaker is an alumnus, now a member of the Secretariat of Southeast Asia Research Academy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome with a virtual applause our plenary speaker for this webinar series, Dr. Rex Lim. A virtual applause, please.
Hello, good morning, Sir, what's this? Teresito, sorry. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible po. We can hear you. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Bugnaw bitaw kaayo. Bugnaw kay ang panahon, no? Let me share my screen, and I'd like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Gary Lagatiera for this kind invitation. Thank you very much for the invitation, and good morning as well to the students, of course, who are here, to the program heads of the college in Moncayo College of Arts, Sciences, and Technology. All right. So my task this morning is to discuss on the basics of applied or action research. Why I put applied here, because action research is an applied research, not basic research. Okay, that's the difference between the applied and the basic, and action research falls under applied research since we're expecting an action. So just to engage the participants, I'm requesting you to, I'm sorry, I cannot see my chat box. I have here some leveling off activity, and I would like you to engage with me using the chat box. All right. So um, wait. All right. So in a scale of 1 to 4, rate your perceived readiness in doing action research. We have 1 as not ready at all and 4 as very much ready. Again, in a scale of 1 to 4, can you rate your perceived readiness in doing action research? 1 as not ready at all, and 4 as very much ready. Thank you very much for your answers. We have here 2, Ordaneza, 2. We have 4. Very good, Doc Gary. 2, 3, 3, 2. All right. At least on average, you're like on a 3 or 2, somewhat ready or quite ready. Thank you very much for your engagement. Okay, at least that gives me an idea of how far you've learned on action research. Next is, I'm sorry. In a scale of 1 to 4 again. Okay. 4 again. Rate your perceived knowledge of the concepts essential in doing action research. Again, in a scale of 1 to 4, can you rate your perceived knowledge of the concepts essential in doing action research? We have 1, no knowledge, and 4, as much knowledge. All right. And the same thing I can see in the chat box. On average, you're in the range of 2 or 3, little knowledge or some knowledge. Thank you so much for your engagement. And we have here, um, all right. So here, you're going to rate the following terms or rank. I'm sorry. You're going to rank the following terms or concepts based on your understanding or knowledge of each. Maybe you can just use the initials like T for triangulation, NA for needs assessment, R for reflection, I for intervention, and FQ for focused question. Of course, the first will be the first rank, and the last initials will be considered the last rank. Again, you're going to rank the following terms or concepts based on your understanding or knowledge of each, where the first rank is considered to be of your expert, or maybe you're knowledgeable on it. For example, I'm knowledgeable on the concept of focus question. Well, that's my first rank. And I'm least knowledgeable on, let's say, triangulation. That's going to be the last rank. So I'm waiting for your answer because these are the concepts necessary to understanding action research, concept on triangulation, concept on needs assessment, on reflection, on intervention, and of course, a focus question or research questions in basic research. And we'll have focus question for. All right, thank you so much, Laura Lee. We have N, a needs assessment. You're very familiar with that, followed by reflection. Then you have focus question, intervention, and you have triangulation as the least familiar of the following concepts. Thank you so much. We have Georgie, NA. What's NA? Needs assessment. I thought not applicable. Thank you, Georgie. Needs assessment. Well, yeah, looking into these 2 answers, I think needs assessment is the most familiar concept among these concepts that you have here. I mean, flashed on your screen. Yeah, thank you, Maria Faye. We have also needs assessment. I was actually asking for the ranking. I think it's difficult to like do the ranking here. Thank you, May J, Saren. We have R. Okay, that's great. Reflection followed by needs assessment. Then we have focus question, intervention, and triangulation. I understand that it's like needs assessment as the most familiar concept, and you have triangulation as the least familiar concept. Well, I understand it may be a foreign to you, the word triangulation. Thank you so much for your engagement. Thank you. I highly appreciate that. I now proceed to the next slide. Thank you so much. Thank you. So my talk this morning revolves around the following outline. Well, I'll be talking about basic versus applied or action research. Yeah, just a little of the difference maybe of the basic versus applied or action research. Then the basic concepts of action research, interventions in action research, philosophical roots of action research. This is very important because we have to well understand that action research is not actually a quantitative research, nor it is a qualitative research. Much more so that it is not a mixed methods research. It is an action research. It has its own birthright to be both a research method and methodology. And we'll also take a look at the validity of action research. It's also very important because scholars argue that action research is actually a soft science, which is heavily inclined to qualitative research, which actually is. It's just that we have to consider validity of action research for this particular research design to be recognized in the mainstream research kasi hindi naman talaga siya mainstream eh. It's not what researchers usually do because these mainstream research designs are highly quantitative in nature with now the growing popularity of qualitative research. Well, action research it's just at the borderline. Okay, it's just at the borderline. That's why we have to ensure validity of action research. So for it not to be tagged or labeled as soft science or not scientific. And we'll also consider discussing teacher as researcher since we're all, I think, educators here. The practical side, okay, of doing research or action research in the classroom. I'd like to begin my discussion with with the basic definition of research according to Grattan and Jones 2009. Research is a systematic process of discovery and advancement of human knowledge. Okay, according to Theodorson in 1969, you see that this has been defined. I mean, was defined, conceptualized in 1969. Research refers to any honest attempt to study a problem systematically or to add to man's knowledge of a problem. Uh-huh. And we have where Saunders and others define research as something that people undertake to find out things in a systematic way, thereby increasing their knowledge. Now, if you're going to look at these three definitions, we can find something in common. In the first definition, we have here the systematic process, okay, of discovery. In the definition of Theodorson, we have to study a problem systematically. All right. Still, we have the term systematically, and according to Saunders and others, we have here to find out things in a systematic way. You see that all these definitions all boil down to a particular concept, which is systematic. So therefore, research must be systematic in nature. We do a lot of things. We do data gathering. We do data analysis. And in doing all of these activities, there must be a system since it follows a certain process, certain procedure. If it does not follow any process or any procedure which can be replicable in the future, then it is not a good research. It is not a good science. It is a bad science. You know, that's why when you will be publishing your paper, there are peer reviewers who will look into the bad science of your research. And one of the bad sciences of your research is not to properly delineate the procedures, okay, the scientific procedures you have gone through in your research. Why? Because again, if we're going to look at the definitions of these experts, research must be done systematically, and so therefore we have to follow certain procedures. And here are this is not absolute. Actually, this is just generic guidelines of how we do research. Basically, we'll begin with idea for a research project, okay, through brainstorming, basically dialoguing, looking for a research gap in the literature. Then the next thing that you can probably do is searching on literature and understanding of the rationale, looking into the development of the problem, looking into the historical context of the problem so you can properly situate your current problem in a global scale, in a national scale, maybe in local scale. All right. Then following that would be identification of the key unknowns and research questions. That's why maybe you've heard your professors telling you that you have to establish the gap by reviewing literature. This is what I'm saying here. Identification of the key unknowns, referring to the gaps of the existing literature and research questions. Then following that is aims and objectives. It is very logical that aims and objectives should follow after identification of the gaps, you know, because these aims and objectives should be focused on discovering answers of the gaps, of the unknowns, of the existing literature relative to your study. And following formulating aims and objectives would be identification of hypotheses to be tested, specifically for basic research or quantitative research. Hypothesis is an educated guess, meaning hypothesis should be informed by the literature. All right. Then we have identify key deliverables on the procedure specifically. Now that you have the hypothesis, what you're going to do next on step one, on step two, on step three, on the procedures. That's why here you need to identify key deliverables. And following that, identify key resources, which I think very important because without your resources, without your data, without your samples, without your participants, without your respondents, for example, you cannot do research because what will you be analyzing at the end, right? So you need to properly identify key resources, the samples, the respondents. Well, that includes the literal idea of resources like money, of course, budget, of course, right? And also may include this kind of tools in conducting an interview, for example, now that face-to-face interview is still prohibited. So I think you have to consider with this kind of tools, the use of Google Meet, the use of Zoom, like that. Then on the following step is time frame for research. I think that's also very important because research must be, smart in nature. It must be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, smart, and you have to be time bounded. Okay, you must be able to finish research within the allotted time frame, or else it will no longer be relevant in context. And you will have the workflow model, what you're going to do in the first phase, what you're going to do on the next phase. It's more of just like working on a timeline. Okay, since you need to have a time frame for research, you also need to have a workflow model. So for your research to be feasible within the time frame. And on the following step is identification of the risks and risk mitigation. It's looking into the ethical aspect of your research. It's always part of the total process, even if it is just an action research. Ethical considerations, okay, must be given a premium. As we know, research which is considerably inhumane, okay, is automatically not sound in nature, no matter how grand, okay, no matter how grand the purpose of the research is. Once it is an ethical automatic, it is no longer a sound. It has no social value at all because you're putting in jeopardy people, lives of other people. Just an example. And the final step is to undertake your research after considering all of these steps. You see that? So that's how you go around your research. There's no shortcut to that. Like you cannot go to the field right there and then collecting data without establishing, okay, rigor in each of the steps, especially on this area on looking into the risks and looking into the benefits of your research. Again, even action research should follow the cycle. Okay, should follow the cycle. That's what I mean by systematic process of conducting research. So, what are the objectives of research? Basically, this is very obvious. I know you know all of these, but just to have a refresher, the prime objectives of research are to discover new facts, basically verify and test important facts, especially in quantitative research, analyze an event or process or phenomenon to identify the cause and effect relationship still in quantitative research, develop new scientific tools, concepts, and theories to solve and understand scientific and non-scientific problems can either both quanti or quali, find solutions to scientific, non-scientific, and social problems, okay, and to overcome or solve the problems occurring in everyday life where action research can actually get through this to overcome or solve the problems occurring in everyday life since action research is very practical in nature. So what are the factors to consider? Number one, our problem must be novel in nature, meaning it must be unique, it must be original, because we cannot afford duplication of previously conducted research. So it's not been investigated before. It must be interesting, something that interests you. Well, if you conduct action research, basically it follows that you're interested with what we're doing. Remember that you'll be focusing on what's going on in your classroom. We'll begin on that, especially for pre-service teachers, for teachers, even tenured. We are interested in looking into what's going on in our classrooms. It must also be relevant in time. Very important. It must be feasible, as always. It must be achievable within the time allotment. Is the topic too broad? Can the problem really be investigated? These are some of the questions to be considered. The availability of information. Remember, the identification of resources, because if there are no resources available, then you cannot do your research. You cannot be too ambitious. All right, like you need to travel to like in other areas just to collect data. What costs and time are involved in the analysis? You also have to consider that. But in action research, it doesn't cost much, because you'll be dealing with your own classroom. It must be researchable. Data can be collected to answer the problem. Can the data be analyzed? Okay, because sometimes the problem is not really a problem and it's not researchable. Okay, especially when the problem, especially when the research area has already been answered by existing literature. So there's no point of conducting research at all. Ethical, this is just repetition that involve physical, psychological harm or damage to human organization that put people or institutions in a bad light. Okay, so you have to really inject that to your mind that when we do research, it must be ethical in its very nature. Let's proceed to the definition or maybe a comparison of basic versus applied research. So we'll have a grasp on it. So when we talk of basic or pure research, it is experimental or theoretical work to acquire new knowledge of the underlying foundation of phenomenon, observational facts without any particular application or use in view. So when we talk of the research or basic research, what comes in mind is quantitative research. You'll be testing theories, you'll be conducting experimentations without the idea in mind of applying its use. Okay? Applications maybe in terms of policy change or something like that, but not necessarily on change outright in your practice. Okay? To determine or establish fundamental facts and relationship within the discipline or field of study. There you go. Again, let's just go straight to the idea that when we talk of basic or applied research, we're talking about quantitative research, we're talking about qualitative research, you're talking about mixed methods research, because they're all driving at the following concepts. For example, helps to develop theories, grounded theory. You see that quantitative research utilizing, for example, structural equation modeling, where we can actually modify existing theories. So you see, these are all basic or pure research. What about applied research? Is undertaken to acquire knowledge but directed towards a specific practical aim or objective. So this is solution specific or solution driven, where action research gets in or falls in. It falls in applied research because the very core of action research is to practically provide solutions to the existing problem. Existing problem, of course, the problem must be at hand. All right? To help resolve a particular problem to improve human condition. Okay? To improve human condition. And this is referred to as research and development. We have R&D. To some universities, we have research and development office, because it aims to provide, okay, immediate action or solution to existing problem. So I have here some definitions of action research, and I would like you to identify. Maybe this time we can engage once again our participants in the Zoom room. Okay, hi, yeah, Karen. We have here some of the information. Who conducts AR? You have to identify who conducts AR or action research in the definition. What do they do? what is the purpose of conducting action research, and what's the outcome. All right. Let's begin with the first definition according to Noonan. Imagine it was defined, conceptualized in 1992. By the way, moderator, if I talk too much, I like if I already go beyond the time, please just stop me. It's all right, no worries. Action research is a form of self-reflective inquiry carried out by practitioners aimed at solving problems, improving practice, or enhancing understanding. Now, given that definition, who conducts AR? Again, AR is a form of self-reflective inquiry carried out by practitioners aimed at solving problems, improving practice, or enhancing understanding. Given the definition, who conducts AR? Okay, very good. We have Xavier Plenios. It's the practitioners. Very good. And what do they do? If we can get the right answer, we'll immediately proceed to the next. What do they do?
So
They do what? Mm-hmm. Okay. Gather data. All right. Gather data. Can we find that there in the aim at solving problems? What do they do? Maybe that's the purpose. Maybe that's the maybe that's the purpose of action research. Sorry for that. I need to. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. Sorry. I need to turn off my. All right. Gather data. Okay. Yeah. Aim at solving problems. Okay. Yeah. For the what do they do? All right. Yeah. Self-reflective inquiry. That's a great answer. Okay. What do? They do self-reflective reflective inquiry for the purpose solving problems. Yeah. Improving practice or enhancing understanding. But what about the outcomes? Basically, the outcome is not included in the definition. But looking at the purpose, basically, the purpose could be improved practice, enhanced understanding of the inquiry, right? All right, great. I think we'll just move on. Thank you so much for your indulgence. Thank you. Okay. Mm-hmm. AR is applied research in which the researchers or investigator is also the practitioner, for example, teacher, and attempts to use research as a methodology for identifying the what they do and make decisions on doing it better. I think it's good to just identify who conducts AR. In this case, you have here the researcher, the investigator, or the teacher at large. Another definition, AR is a research done by teachers on their own work to look at how teaching and learning can be understood more clearly and carried out more effectively. So we have done by the teachers, and you look at that on their own work, not the work of others. You'll not be investigating the work of others, but rather you'll be looking at, examining your own work and look at how teaching and learning, how the teaching and how the learning can be understood more clearly and carried out more effectively. To me, this definition is very meaningful, okay? Very exact in what is expected of you as a teacher in the classroom. AR is a type of research that focuses on finding a solution to a local problem. You take note of that. Finding a solution to what? To a local problem in a local setting. So the problem is not necessarily grand. Okay, it's not necessarily grand. You don't need to situate your problem in a global, a national, although it's necessary. But if you cannot find a relevant problem in a national, in a global context, well, it's fine. It's not a problem because this is very contextual. This is the problem that arises in my classroom. And so what? Okay, if others have not shared the same problem with me, okay? For example, a teacher investigates whether a new spelling program she has adopted leads to improvement in her students' achievement scores, something like that. The purpose of AR is to develop new skills or new approaches and to solve problems with direct application to the classroom or working setting. You see, direct application. That's why it falls under applied research. Direct application to the classroom or working working setting. I can actually see doodling here. I'm somebody doodling on my screen. um, AR is a constructive inquiry, okay, during which the researcher constructs his or her knowledge of specific issue through planning. You see that? There must be an appropriate planning, acting, evaluating, refining, and learning from experience. It is a continuous learning process in which the researcher learns, wrong grammar, and also shares the newly generated knowledge with those who may benefit from it. You see, that's also very meaningful. And I actually have here a summary of my activity. Who conducts AR? A teacher, yeah, practitioner. In other words, it's not only the teacher who is expected to conduct AR, action research. They're practitioners in various fields. What do they do? Identify the problem, examine problem, plan, implement, reflect, okay? Evaluate the solution, refine it, learn and share. What's the purpose? Basically to solve problems, to bring about changes and improvement in practice. And what's the outcomes? Problem solved. Understand own practice better, improve teaching, improve students' learning, and there would be a generated new knowledge. Basically, this knowledge is considered to be a local knowledge, okay, contribution to a locally situated problem. And usually, action research comes with this kind of format, although we have a lot of models of action research, but I think this is also a good model from Chemist and McTaggart in 1998, where you can begin with the planning stage, all right, making an observation of what the problem you have in your classroom. Yeah, since we begin with the classroom, since we're all teachers, because we can have a large scale action research. And the focus today, the focus of today's talk is more on a classroom research. So we all can relate. Then after that, acting based on your planning, you have made an observations, maybe a problem, maybe somebody is very rude, maybe maybe your students are not performing well in your assessment, so you'll be implementing certain intervention. Okay, you'll have here the act phase, implementing the observation. Okay, I'm sorry for this. What's this? Uh, people doodling feature. Then we have here observe phase. In the observe phase here, we are actually making an observation on the performance of your students, given the that you have implemented an innovative solution or maybe a certain intervention. Then after that, on observation, you're going to make a reflection whether the findings, okay, of the intervention has actually or have actually improved your practice, have actually improved the performance of your students. Then after which, if it, for example, something went wrong or maybe it's still not, the results of the assessment are still not satisfactory, maybe you can revise the plan and do the cycle again. So you see that it's iterative in nature. The process is iterative. So, all right, the process is iterative. So, yeah, it's different when you simply just do a quantitative research or qualitative research. Okay. Okay, and actually, I'm sorry. Let's proceed to other types or names of action research. So this action research can be like a name or term as participatory research, collaborative investigation. It can be emancipatory research, action learning, or um, contextual action research. Okay. In other words, when you do action research, you don't need to do it alone. It can be participatory in nature, it can be collaborative in nature, because the problem may not be unique to you. The problem may be also existing in other classrooms. So why not do all together to provide solution to the problem existing not just in your classroom, but also existing to other classrooms. So collaborative investigation is very nice. Emancipatory, this is a broad type of action research. It's about giving voice to the voiceless, something like that. Very political in nature. If it is emancipatory. Action learning, yeah, you do have like an action learning cell where you'll be dialoguing, and sharing best practices, providing solution to the brainstorm problem. And contextual action research, still in the classroom, where but you can just simply do it alone. Okay, you can just simply do it alone, not necessarily with a colleague, not necessarily with somebody assisting with you. Here on your screen is the comparative idea on traditional research and action research. Because when we say traditional research, what gets into mind is actually quantitative research. Okay, this is what researchers usually do. Who conducted by university professors, scholars, and graduate students on experimental control group, and that's why most of the teachers, okay, graduate. Teachers, those already in the service, pre-service teachers, have been that kind of fair to conduct research, even if it is an actual research, because their experience is conducting a university-like research, which is way different from conducting an actual research. Because if you will be conducting research to earn a degree, to earn a diploma, basically you need to contribute to the field theoretically and not practically. That's why research is robust, research is grand, research is somewhat like large or big in scope, because you need to contribute to the field theoretically. You'll be modifying the theory, you'll be theorizing existing problems, something like that. But actual research is different, conducted by teachers and principals on children in their care. You see, where in environments where variables can be controlled, usually experimental, in schools and classrooms. You see that this is your environment. When you do action research, you're conducting a study. You're conducting a research in your environment. You're conducting a study or research within your comfort zone. All right? Within your comfort zone. So it's not much of a problem. And it's not much of like, fear when you do action research. How? Using quantitative methods to show some predetermined degree of statistical significance, a cause and effect relationship between variables. But in actual research, using qualitative methods to describe what is happening and to understand the effects of some educational intervention. You see that? Qualitative methods, you'll be conducting an interview. And to what? To describe what is happening and to understand the effects, okay? Some educational intervention. That's why we can also make use of some statistical tools in action research. However, if you're going to go back, the traditional way of doing action research is highly qualitative in nature. Fundamentally, it's qualitative. Why? Because it's about understanding. You see the keyword here? To describe, to understand. It's highly qualitative in nature. It's about probing, okay? Making an investigation to clearly understand the problem. So fundamentally and originally, action research is qualitative in nature. That's why there are many arguments. Why include statistical, explanations? Why include numbers when you do action research? Some scholars argue on that because they're very traditional. Research evolves over time. So we can actually include quantitative data, but not necessarily quantitative in nature, just the data. We get the qualitative data, the quantitative data, and we analyze it accordingly, qualitatively and quantitatively. But it is still an action research, because quantitative research has its own right, has its own purpose. Quali has its own right, has its own purpose, and so with action research, it has its own right, it has its own purpose. So that cannot be merged. It's just that we take quality data, we take quantity data, and we analyze it accordingly. But the purpose is different, to provide an action, okay, of an existing problem. The why, to report and publish conclusions that can be generalized to larger populations. You see that? You'll be using the current findings to generalize the population. But in action research, to take action and effect positive educational change in the specific school environment that was studied. Okay? It's about taking action and to effect positive educational change in the specific school environment that was studied. So when are we going to decide whether we go for collaborative or just individual action research? Is the research issue and scale when the problem, as what I already told you, is also existing not only in your own classroom but also existing in other classrooms, your colleagues, for example. So you can do collaborative AR. Information needed, maybe you need more information. Collaborative AR is good. Resources needed, maybe you need more resources. So collaborative AR is also good. Work involved, it would be very taxing since you'll do phase 1 and phase 2. So collaborative AR is good. Time investment needed. Okay, if it is a large scale AR, then collaborative AR will do. People who might benefit from the action and the findings. It may not only benefit to you, it may also benefit to your colleagues in the college or in your classroom, for example, as teachers. Then you might as well do that collaboratively. I would like to discuss this one. The framework for research, interconnection of worldviews, design, and research methods. I know you already have your idea with this one because I think you'll have your like a research one, your research two in your in your subject in college. Like it's good to look into the philosophical roots, okay, the philosophical roots of action research to justify that it is not a quantitative research, that it is not a qualitative research, that it is an action research which has its own birthright, okay, which is distinct from the quantity, the quality, and the mixed. So generally, this is according to Creswell, philosophical views, we have post-positivist, constructivist, transformative, and pragmatic. Post-positivist, highly quantitative in nature. If you're quantitative, if you're inclined to quantitative, you are adopting a post-positivist or positivist perspective. You believe that everything can be measured. You believe that everything is tangible, that can be seen, okay, that can be measured, that can be quantified. If you're into qualitative research, you're adopting this kind of perspective, which is constructivist, where you believe that reality is socially constructed. That's why you need to interview 1, interview 2, interview 3, and you're going to make a theme. Okay, like yeah, you'll look for what is common of what they share, and you'll have a transformative, which is change oriented. Okay, if you would like to cause change, if you would like to implement an innovation that's highly transformative. Okay, and we'll have pragmatic, which is problem oriented. Like you do not subscribe to either the positivist perspective or constructivist perspective. You are looking at the problem, and you'll be deciding on a particular method that can best solve the problem, either quantity or quality. That's why if you're into mixed methods, you're heavily inclined to pragmatic point of view. And that's what you can see in the arrows here. You have here double-headed arrows because they're informing each other. The worldview is actually informing the design. The design is also informing the worldview. And so with the research methods, the design is informing the method. The method is also is informing the design, and they inform actually one another. Like when you do research, they must be aligned to a particular worldview, to a particular research method, to a particular research design. Like I'm doing quantitative research. So what's my philosophical point of view? What's my philosophical root? That's post-positivist. What about my research method? What am I going to do? Since this is quantitative research, this is what you're going to do. Where can, the very question now, that's why I put here, because I'd like to focus on the philosophical roots of research. And the very question now is, where can we situate action research in these philosophical roots? Is it, since we only have 4 so far, positivist or post-positivist, constructivist, transformative, and pragmatic, we can situate action research on these areas, on transformative and pragmatic philosophies. Because why? Transformative because it is change-oriented, and in action research, we aim at that. That's why we implement an intervention because we would like change. We would like to improve our practice. We would like to improve our performance. And it is also pragmatic because it does not adhere to any of these. Like I can get quality data, I can get quantity data because these are what I need in order to understand the bigger picture, in order to understand the problem in a large scale. I mean, totally. I can better understand the problem when I have a quantity data, when I have a quality data. But I would like to emphasize that it is not a mixed methodology. It may be a mixed methods where you have the quality data, you have the quantity data, you'll be analyzing them, but not necessarily integrating them. Because when we talk of mixed methodology, you should have a particular framework where you integrate the quality data and the quantity data. Okay, it must be fully integrated if it's mixed methodology. I'm saying this because most of my observations when people are scholars or maybe practitioners are proposing, they like, yeah, actual research, but um, actual research utilizing a phenomenological study, something like that. But to me, it's erroneous because a phenomenological study has its own purpose. And you have actual research, it has also its own purpose. And you cannot mix the two because they have their own what? Philosophical root. And you cannot just simply mix them. Okay? We cannot just simply mix them. That's the argument. All right, okay. I think I'll just skip this one because we have our students here and maybe this may not be very important to them. Okay, what makes a good action research topic? The topic or issue must be important to the team of teachers, or the school. Yeah, that's very important so you can relate. It must be relevant to their professional lives. That's why you have to consider your own classroom because it's important to you as a teacher, as a professional. It involves a pressing problem or a new teaching strategy or assessment instrument that researchers think or hypothesize will improve the problem. This is very good area here. It involves pressing problem of what? Teaching strategy, for example, assessment instrument, for example, especially when curriculum changes or teaching strategies, teaching assessments also change, and there's also modification of your syllabus and syllabi. So action research can get through it. Okay, can get through it. You can apply that. Researchers can reflect on their daily professional lives, on what's going on, what went well, what went right, something like that. So it's good to have a colleague to share with what you're experiencing in your classroom so you can properly spot what's wrong, okay? What are the things that you need to improve? Like what classroom problem or issue do I need to solve or improve? It's good to share that with your colleague. Brainstorm to arrive at a real life issue to study, yeah? In public school, we have the so-called the LAC Learning Action Cell. We have that kind of session, so where we will be sharing best practices we have in the classroom, where we'll also be sharing like problems we encounter, and we'll be brainstorming on possible solution. I don't know in your practice, in your college, or in university, I think. So it's good to have that, you know. How can we find ways to encourage slow readers to engage in reading? This is an example, like a problem statement. How can we find ways to encourage slow readers to engage in more reading? What are the best strategies to settle down quickly at the start of the class? You know, these are some of the questions which are needing answer, of which the answer can be best solved through an action research. All right. Now, let's take a look at some of the characteristics of action research. Number one, it is a social practice, basically, because it's highly collaborative. You'll be working with your colleagues, you'll be working with your students, all right? Basically, because you'll be interviewing them, you'll be conducting an assessment. You see, so it's the understanding of the problem is socially constructed, so heavily quality in nature. Aim towards improvement. That's why you're looking at the problem. That's why your concern is to provide an intervention because you're aiming at improving your practice as evidenced by the performance of your students. Okay, because if your students perform well, you're also performing well. It's as simple as that. That's why the aim of action research is to improve your own practice and in turn improve the performance of your students. It is cyclical because it is not one shot, okay? Unlike in basic research, you do quantity, for example, the experimental, for example. It's not, although there are iterations for some experimental studies, but in the point, again, the purpose is different when we do action research. Again, here it's cyclical because after the reflection stage, you'll do it again. Especially if in case the results of reflecting on the findings are not favorable to what is expected. So you'll do it again. You'll have the second iteration and until you can come up with an almost perfect result. It's a systematic inquiry, yeah, because it has still to go through the systematic process, the scientific process of like identifying the problem, looking at the literature to know about the problem, making a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, making conclusion, then communicating results. You see that it's still a systematic inquiry. We cannot do a shortcut. And it's just that many consider um, action research as a soft option or a soft science because of its close interaction with constructivist people, with constructivists, no? Because it's socially constructed, eh? So you'll not be testing theory, right? That's why we have to be more careful about our research designs and analysis of our findings. We must be able to see rigor, okay, in the research designs and also in the analysis of the data. That's the only thing we can say that, okay, I'm doing action research right. If we can see that there is rigor in the research design and in the data analysis. Later on, we'll be talking a lot about it. It's reflective. That's why many believe that action research is not scientific, but rather reflective. That makes more of it as a soft science because it is heavily reflective in each of the phases because you'll be introspecting. Am I doing right? Is my intervention appropriate? Oh, what about the outcomes? What happens to my students when I implement this kind of intervention? Reflection should be done in every phase. Okay, in every phase of the cycle, we'll have the observation phase, the implementing phase, something, yeah, until you can complete the cycle. Reflection must be within each of the phases. It's more of allowing you and improving your metacognitive skill. Thinking about your thought process. It's very important. You have to think about your thought process. What's going on in your mind? You see that? It's becoming reflection, requires highest form of thinking. It's not easy to reflect, and only few people are doing the reflections. You see, only few people are doing the reflections, and action research tells us to be reflective. We don't have to wait others to tell us that this is what we're going to do. We have to think of what we can do in our classroom. It's participative, basically because you'll be inviting your students to be part of the study interview, for example. You'll be inviting your colleagues. It's really participative. Determined by the practitioners. You'll be the one to determine because you are the ones exposing yourself in the classroom. You know better than the others. You know better than your colleagues, okay? Since you are inside the classroom, you are the only person who knows what's going on. Even if there is an observer, still the observer cannot capture the total problem. For example, if there is a problem in your classroom, because they're just there for a setting, they're just there for an hour, and they'll have another observation for another semester, maybe something like that. So you will be the one who should determine the problem. You will be the one who can justify that. And that's the characteristics of an action research. That an action research should be like this. If it goes beyond that, or if you do the other way around, I think we'll have a problem on it. Okay? And how to begin with, you'll have to ask yourself, what difficulties do you experience as you teach? You see that? Very simple, right? You just have to ask yourself, what difficulties do you experience as you teach? Ano ba yung mga problema mo? Ano ba yung medyo hindi madali sa'yo, yung nahihirapan ka? You just have to note them down. What difficulties do your students experience as they learn? As evidence in your assessment, well, formative assessment, bakit only like 25% pass my formative assessment, something like that. This formative assessment is better. I mean, it's more beneficial than summative assessment. So looking into the trend of your assessment, well, it gives you, it triggers you to do some sort of reflection of what you can probably do to improve your practice, okay, to improve as well the student's performance. What is your proposed solution to the problem? Given that you have identified already the problem, ano yung pwede mong magawa? Ano yung proposal mo? Ito yung gagawin ko. Why are you proposing it? What's the reason behind your proposal? It must be what? Literature-based. It must be principle-based. Because you're gonna just like make a proposal of an intervention, for example, without anchoring it to a particular principle or a particular theory. Although we can make an innovation, yes, but the innovation must be informed by literature, must be informed by scientific principles. Alright? So you'll have your basis. You cannot just go there, ganito ang gagawin ko kasi sabi ni sir, I can do an innovative practice. So magawa-gawa ka dyan. Wala namang problema doon. Well, that's part of your creativity and that's highly celebrated. Well, for me, okay, that's highly celebrated. But you just have to make sure that the principles behind it are scientific. Why you're doing that? It may be an innovative practice, but the innovation must stem from or must come from scientific principles. Okay? And how will it be implemented? The procedure is very important that you'll have to that you'll have to tally the procedure. Like first step, this is what you're going to do. Second step, this is what you're going to do. Third, and so on and so forth. So that the procedures can be replicated by other researcher, by other teacher. Because you cannot be selfish, you know? like you notice that what you're doing is actually improving your practice as what you've observed in your classroom. You cannot just take it on your own. Why not share? You know, you have to give a piece of yourself to others. That's the purpose, that's the importance of having a network. That's why you are in school, okay? Because you ought to share strategies, best practices with one another. So you have to properly list down the procedures or the steps that you do inside the classroom, which are actually improving your practice. So what are some of the sources of ideas? Actually, this is just a repetition. Like our students don't seem to parang nakita mo na mga bata hindi talaga participative. Ano kayang pwede mong magawa? I'd like to change the way my students react, the way my students respond. So ano pwede mong gagawin? I'd like to integrate more of like brain-based teaching into my class. How could I do this? Yung mga ganun. We'd like to try out what? Ano yung gusto mong i-try sa kanila? Maybe you'd like to try certain strategies like read and tell. Okay, I'd like to integrate read and tell strategy in my class. How could I do this? Or what happened if we do something? I've noticed that some of my students in my class, okay, ito yung nakikita mo, and others are not. So how could you find out what's happening? Okay, these are some of the triggers for you to do actual research. I'm really puzzled by what do others think is going on? What could I do about it? You know, some of the catchphrases that will trigger you, inform you that, okay, this is the very time that I need to do an action research. It says here that to make a researchable problem requires a good deal of narrowing and refinement. Sometimes we're trapped with broad ideas. The only thing that you're going to do is to narrow them down, to narrow the ideas, okay? I'm looking at the participants. We're already 140. Okay. All right. We'll need you again, but okay, I think I still have a lot of slides. I'll just go on. If you have your questions, you can start dropping them in the chat box. I'd be very glad to answer them later. Action research is notable in teacher education. You see, notable. It's popular in teacher education. Why? Because pre-service teachers, particularly student teachers, are trained in the methodology necessary to ensure valid results. You see that? Necessary to ensure valid results. We teachers are not taught to just mimic what others are doing. You know, because when we we teach, we appropriate our teaching given the context, given the year levels that we have, given the students that we have. Our way of teaching in one classroom may be different in another classroom. There is no one-size-fits-all strategy when we implement our teaching. So you see, we implement, we experiment, and in the process, we're observing whether this particular practice is actually what? Significant to the performance of our students. So that's why actual research is very popular in teacher education, because we do a lot of innovations, we do a lot of experimentations, we do a lot of things. We try out a lot of things just to what? To affect learning in our students. You see that? Are trained in the methodology necessary to ensure valid results. Again, there's no one size fits all strategy. Your strategy in one classroom may be different in another classroom. Your strategy in teaching certain subject in STEM students may be different. Your strategy in teaching humanities and social sciences students, and same goes to the program. Like you're teaching research and the program is IT, information technology. Your approach should be different if you're teaching, for example, education students, something like that. You see that? So we're making experimentations, and to capture the effect, to capture the effectiveness, we can do an action research. That's very meaningful, right? It's very exciting, and it's not that difficult. Now, let's proceed to the rigor and action research. Again, as I already mentioned, most of the scholars argue that action research is not scientific. That's why, since we're doing action research, we have to ensure rigor, okay? A certain level of thoroughness in conducting action research. It has been criticized in the literature that one-way flow of research evidence to classroom has been theoretically been criticized. What do you mean by one-way flow of research? The teachers are considered only as consumers of findings of research, that we're not actually trained to do research. Because we're teachers, we're just taught, we're just trained to teach, and we're not trained to do research. It's like it's expected that you as a teacher, you're just simply recipient of findings. You're simply recipient of what? Of research. So you see that there's already a bias on it. Teachers need to help researchers to formulate realistic research questions which conceivably lead to practical evidence. As what you can see the definition, teachers are being separated from researchers, that we have to help researchers formulate realistic research questions. Why separate them? Why can't we be teacher as researcher? Why are we waiting for researchers to do research in our own classroom? Why can't we? You see? So that's very important of action research, where we are dealing with our own practices inside the classroom. So researchers are teachers or other practicing educators, not trained scientists, according to those back. You see that? That's very biased, very branding. However, well, in reality, okay, somehow that's true. We don't have much time to do research because sometimes we're overloaded with the subjects, overloaded with ancillary tasks. You see that, especially those pre-service teachers, when you will be absorbed in public school, the same thing. That's the reality. That when we are teaching, we're not just simply teaching. How I wish that's the only thing we do. You have a lot of tasks to do, checking papers, and all. And so you have to properly allocate your time. That despite your heavy schedule, despite you being busy, you should be able to what? Do research, because that improves you professionally. Hodgkinson, remember in 1957, criticized the lack of teachers' training in conducting research. Therefore, he thought teachers were unable to conduct rigorous scientific inquiry. Although argument was made in 1957, but it still holds today. That's why we changed the curriculum. Okay, that's why there are memorandas. Okay, in order to, as what Dr. Gary mentioned, include action research in what's that? In particular subject FS, okay? Field study. You see, that's actually a call to this argument. Or else teachers are still teachers, are just teachers, and are not trained to do research. Action research is not rigorous. This is another argument. Action research is not rigorous scientific inquiry. Action research is reflective inquiry undertaken by educators in order to better understand the education environment and to improve practice. So since it is not scientific, action research is not a mainstream research. Like, it's not celebrated, it's not well accepted in the community. However, today it's already accepted. In fact, we have now journals indexed by Scopus, indexed by Web of Science, which are only publishing action research papers. We already have that. The movement is ongoing. But before, in the 1990 universities, it's really a not popular and considered really a soft science. So to countermeasure that, we have rigors of conducting action research. While a goal of scientifically based research in education is to prove the effectiveness of an instructional method, the goal of action research is to improve a practitioner's own practice. Yan, improve practitioner's own practice. The latter point to the lack of validity according to Emerald Publishing. This is Emerald publication. That's a reputable publication company. The latter point to the lack of validity and generalizability on the ground that the intervention is one-off and not repeatable. So parang soft science siya kasi nga it lacks validity, it lacks generalizability kasi contextual naman siya. Your own classroom lang, you'll be conducting research in your own classroom. And the intervention is one-off and would not be repeatable. That's why to countermeasure that, you have to properly list down the procedures so that what you do in your classroom can be repeated in another classroom by other teacher. It is not perceived as mainstream and will therefore not be welcomed by the gatekeepers. Okay, gatekeepers meaning editors, reviewers of the all-important mainstream international journals, according to ML. That's really true. But again, as what I mentioned, you don't need to worry. You can write an action research and you can simply publish that to high-referee journals. This is what I mentioned. When quantitative research is the only recognized research, while qualitative research is considered to be a soft science, where action research is heavily inclined to qualitative research. That's one of the problems of the many of the scholars. So how to improve the validity of action research? Validity can be measured by applying rigor, thoroughness, completeness, all right, in the research methodology and design. In particular, using the relevant literature, both method and content, to situate the problem and then to reflect on the findings. Although it is very contextual, but it's also good to revisit or consult existing literature because it could be that your problem has already been shared to many by other scholars, and it could be that you already have found solutions to this kind of problem, and you will just replicate what they did to your own classroom and notice and find out whether what they did is also functional, is also operative in your own classroom. Using measures and methods that are well respected in the literature, measures and methods. You see that? Like you do interview, because it's highly respected. You collect quantity data, you collect quality data. You see? Using standard tools to increase reliability, for example, written protocols for interviews. You should have interviews validated by experts in the field before you're going to conduct an interview. Writing up the research in a well-argued and well-documented manner. As always, if it is research, it must be well-argued, it must also be well-documented. How to ensure validity? They must not try to generalize the results to other groups of students, especially if you're just having that in your own classroom. It would be very difficult. It's very contextual. But if it is already a large scale, okay, well, you can generalize the findings given the population that you have in your school. But if you only have a classroom, being single, your own classroom, it's difficult to generalize your results to the other classroom, to other students. They must be as objective as possible and recognize their own inevitable biases. That's actually an issue. How we can be very objective when we are the ones conducting research. We're the ones conducting an interview later on. I'm going to give you some of the rigors, that you can possibly do. They must ask. They must ask questions that can be answered by collecting data. Because sometimes questions are too broad, which cannot be properly collected anymore. They must collect data by using well-designed procedures, okay? Procedures which are well-established. They must analyze their data carefully and thoroughly. Carefully and thoroughly. You will not just simply jump into conclusion and there you go. You must properly analyze data qualitatively or quantitatively using as much as possible software because that provides more validity in your findings. Here are, according to those Megan and Swalbach, okay, rigors of conducting action research by asking the right question, examining the literature, collecting data, analyzing the data, using a critical friend, your colleague, okay, very important, and ensuring trustworthiness, okay. of the findings. We'll go each of these um, details. All right. Asking the right question. So here are some, asking the right question, asking the right research question, okay? When you do an action research. So here are some of the guidelines. The question should be relevant and significant to the teachers in the classroom. Well, that's understandable. It should have the appropriate scope, not too broad or too specific. We know that. Okay, it should be feasible to accomplish. We also know that. It must be smart. The question must be smart. It should be open-ended. Okay. Well, for qualitative part, it should be objective and not assume an answer. This is actually the problem because most of the time we assume an answer. Okay, like we're going to ask, is there a significant change? We're already making an assumption that there is a change, right? That's also another concern. It should be stated clearly and concisely. It can be answered by collecting data, and the question must be ethical, especially when you'll be formulating interview guide questions, where the questions must not be, there must be no derogatory questions, okay, in your interview guide questions. Still, for example, why don't students do homework and how does parental support impact student achievement? These are examples of action research questions, which are problematic. Number one, there is the use of contraction here. Well, technically speaking, no use of contraction if it is academic writing. And number two, why does parental support impact student achievement? Somehow there's already an assumption here that parental support is impacting student achievement. All right. It's impacting it's impacting student achievement. When in fact, if you're going to look at the question is directed towards identifying whether the intervention is effective or not. In action research, we are concerned on whether we have improved our practice or not. It's the I, okay, as an object of inquiry. Okay, that's why here are some of the recommendations. Like when they're doing group work, the students seem to waste a lot of time as your observation. As your question should be, how can I increase the amount of task-oriented time for pupils engaging in group work? It's about the I, it's about the me. Your concern is how you're going to improve your practice. All right? Not on looking at how effective the intervention is. Okay? My pupils are not satisfied with the methods I used to assess their work. How can I improve? You see, how can I improve assessment methods with their help? Okay, most parents want to help their children and the school by supervising homework. How can we do to make their help more productive? It's about the we. It's about the I. So that's an action research. Okay. That's an action research. That's how we can somehow formulate our research questions. Examining the literature, as what I already mentioned, it's always good to examine existing literature, even though you may argue, sir, this is a local problem, this is a local context, I don't need to consult existing literature. You still have to. Again, there might be scholars who already have conducted same study as you, and they may have already the answer, and that you have to just simply replicate. In collecting the data, you have the so-called triangulation, and we have now the emerging theme or term, polyangulation. That when we collect the data, we're not just focusing on one data, on the assessment of the student, maybe in a form of assessment. What type of assessment? Maybe one data on the essay exam, maybe another data for multiple type of tests, maybe one data for what? For maybe their performance tasks where like they're going to make presentation, they're going to make like and any performance is literally where they have performed, and you'll be triangulating these results so you can make what? Conclusions. You can make decisions as to their what? As to their performance. Because if you're going to look into or to consider just one data, okay, from one source, it's very biased. You see that you have to capture the performance, the real performance of the learners by looking at different angles, by looking at different windows, so to call it. as according to Sagor, we have to look at the performance of children, of students, from different windows, from different angles, because it's difficult to make a conclusion. Ingon dayon tanga ay bugo maning bataan, hindi man siya kapalo, wala yun ano. By just one, by just one data coming from one source. We have different strengths. We have different strengths, and we have also weaknesses. We have to properly triangulate them so we know what we can do to enhance students' performance on one side, and to what? Complement, reinforce, remediate performance on the other side. You see that? Some of the data that you can probably collect is on journals, student work, rubrics, mga checklists, surveys, interviews, and we also have post-test. Okay? So teacher, researcher must choose wisely to pick the methods that will best yield the data necessary to answer research questions. All right. In the analysis of the data, we have to properly synthesize all our findings from different data points. Okay, since we know that we need to do triangulation, and so with the data analysis, you have to properly synthesize. Okay, all the data that you have, considering the quantity data, considering the quality data, considering different forms. You have the performance, you have the multiple type of test, you have the essay type of test, and now you make decision as to whether or not your performance is really improving given their assessment results. Using a critical friend, using a critical friend, very important. We need someone who is honest to tell us what we're doing. Are we doing things right? Are we doing things wrong? What are the biases? We need somebody whom we can call a friend. Okay? A friend who is critical. Not necessarily harsh, but someone who will evaluate what you're doing. Okay? Very important to locate for example, blind spots, okay, to examine biases and judgment. We need that. What about trustworthiness? Are we really sure that we can trust the data? So these are some of the things that you can probably do. Trustworthiness of the data. Do you have enough data? The one that I told you, that you have to do triangulation or polyangulation. Have you collected any incidences of data that disprove your findings? You see, it's very important. Some of the data which counter-argue with your current evidence, and you have to explain that properly. You have to capture that. Why is that so? That there are some data which are actually counter-arguing with the evidence. Are your students being honest? Because sometimes they perform accordingly when they know that they're being observed, when they know that they're subject of an intervention. Okay, have any significant events affected your students during the course of your study? Because their changes, their development may have not been caused by your intervention, but sometimes their changes and development have been caused by extraneous variables, by other variables outside your intervention. So that's why you have to properly examine that. Okay? Because you may be making an assumption, you may be making a conclusion or implication which are not captured by your data. You see? You see that? That's very important. All right. Trustworthiness of the data still. Have you selected a representative group of students? Have any of the students left their class during the course of the study? Why? If there's anyone, do your students know that they're part of a study? This is a very important thing that you have to consider because they might be changing their behavior. That's what we call by Hawthorne effect. Will they have to properly situate themselves, their behavior, since they're being observed? Do you have any other observers in your classroom? Because observer can sometimes influence student behavior. What about trustworthiness of the researcher? Can you trust yourself as a researcher, given the data that you have? Are you overly subjective? You see that? Have you been as objective as possible? You need to have a critical friend to check on you. Because it's difficult to check yourself, Sometimes it's difficult to check yourself. Am I okay? Am I doing right? So we need somebody who can check on us. A critical friend will help you check your assumptions and beliefs. Okay, sometimes our assumptions and beliefs influence the way we interpret the data. Okay, so we have to check on it, or position as a teacher, because we may have some biases later on in the interpretation of the data. Trustworthiness of the indices, okay? In the conclusions that we have, are you sure that your conclusions are really trustworthy? Are you oversimplifying what you have found? Are you oversimplifying? Are you sure? Is that all? Could changes in achievement be attributed to developmental changes in the children rather than to your activities with them? This is also very important. Maturation, okay, is one of the reasons of changes. And it may be beyond or out of the scope of your intervention. Are you drawing conclusions that the data don't support? This is also a very good question. Have you considered all possible explanations? This is very important. All angles must be captured and must be justified. Are you overgeneralizing? This is also very important. Remember that in doing action research, you cannot extend too much your generalization because it's very contextual. You only have a classroom, you only have a school, so you cannot overextend your generalization. Have you checked your findings with other teachers, parents, or students? Because findings must be put into context, must be contextualized. All right? Because you're going about a problem locally situated, and your culture in your school may be different to the culture of another school. So it's like difficult to compare. Okay? That's why you have to again check on the immediate community. Have you found other studies that have shown similar results? This is also very important if there is. If there's none, well, it's not a problem. But you have to make sure that you have saturated academic databases before you can say that you have not seen anything. Research evidence would be pedagogically valid when research and practice mutually inform one another. And this is a very good, what you call this, illustration that you conduct research because of what you have found in your teaching and because what you have discovered in your practice. Meaning, research must be informed by teaching, must be informed by practice, and that your teaching must be informed by the findings of your research and must be informed by what you discovered in the practice. And your practice must be informed by the findings of your research and must be informed by the current pedagogy, for example, in your teaching. You see that? This is the very time that we can say that research, what we're doing, is pedagogically valid if we allow our findings to inform, to influence what we are doing. If we do research and the findings do not affect us in any way, so what's the point of conducting research in the first place? You see, so we do action research because we want to modify our practices, we want to improve our practices, and that must be tangible, that must be observable. And this model is providing us a concrete picture how research evidence or findings can be pedagogically valid. That if the following informs or inform one another. Okay? They must be informing one another. That research informs practice, practice informs teaching, teaching informs research, and the cycle goes on and on. Teachers need to be engaged in research in every conceivable way, approaching their daily work as public intellectuals in active pursuit of better understandings and more promising lines of inquiry. Exactly, because we are public intellectuals, whether we like it or not. Teachers, soon-to-be teachers, pre-service teachers are public intellectuals, where they're facing people, where they're facing our students. We're saying something, we're teaching them, and we have to make sure that we're teaching what is right, okay? And it's only through research that we can improve our practice, we can improve ourselves, we can professionally improve our content and our pedagogy, okay? So research is a way. So don't you worry, I'm like, almost done. What does it mean to be a teacher researcher, the practical side? Ano ba ibig sabihin ito? So what does it mean to be a teacher researcher? Kasi hindi naman natin pwede i-separate yun. Again, let's not wait for others to do research in our classroom. We do it ourselves, okay, as teachers. Being intrigued by what students say and do. As simple as that. Being a teacher researcher, we just have to be intrigued by what students say and do. Ano ba yung kanilang mga pinagsasabi? Ano ba yung kanilang mga ginagawa? Let's just be curious, keen observer. becoming curious about why they respond in one way or the other. Bakit masyadong tactless itong batang to? Bakit ganun siya mag-respond? Bakit nag-stutter siya? Yung mga ganun. Wondering how to shape one's own responses in order to facilitate student learning. How can I make myself appropriate para naman mag-improve yung kanilang learning, para mas lalo akong maintindihan? Ano kayong dapat kong gagawin? So, ganun lang, di ba? Mahirap ba yan? Hindi mahirap yan. Kasi ginagawa na natin yan. Choosing ways to document learning and pondering what has been happening and why. It's just a matter of documentation. Kasi pag gagawa ka niyan, dapat magdo-document ka para makita mo yung trend, para makita mo yung pattern. Sharing with colleagues what has been learned. Very important. Again, you cannot be selfish. You cannot take them all. You have to share them. With your colleagues, the purpose of why we're doing something. All teachers engage in elements of research as part of their normal teaching practices. That's why I'm already telling you that ginagawa na natin to. We're already doing that. Notice and wonder about something that occurs in the midst of teaching. Have we not noticed? Are we not noticing and wondering something in the middle of our teaching? We noticed a lot. You see? We noticed a lot. And what we notice can be a source of our action research. Making notes in a lesson plan book about what just happened. Okay, right? Like in our lesson plan, we do some annotation, like 30% of the students passed my examination, passed my assessment. Why is that so? Why only 30%? Collect examples of student work. Are we not collecting examples of student work? We do. We are. Right? Wondering what to do next based on this evidence. Now you know that these are the pieces of evidence. These are the assessment results. What are we going to do next to reinforce and to enhance performance of our students and share their thinking by talking with colleagues? The same thing, always go back to your colleagues. It's always good to share with them. And based on these practical things that you do in the classroom, we'll now convert them into an action research. And that's what I call intentional research, where you have to intentionally put into academic writing what you usually do. Okay? Like, you do generating particular issues, you're going to read relevant literature, copying specific samples of student writings and drawings. For example, yung mga quizzes nila, writing a reflective journal about their teaching and students learning, our teaching actually, then facilitating discussions about student learning with colleagues. You see that? Ganyan lang naman ang dapat gagawin natin. So, future teachers, mga pre-service teachers, you know now what you're going to do. And much is expected of you, right? Kasi, hindi naman yung masyadong mahirap. Then, you're going to develop a theoretical framework within which to examine a question. It's just a matter of formalizing what you usually do in the classroom in an academic writing. Record instruction as well as archive a wide variety of data sources. Kasi nga mag-triangulate ka. Mag-analyze ka ng videos of students, actions, and utterances. Well, it depends, okay, of the problem and present their findings at conferences and in publications. It's always like that we do research, even if it is an action research, we have to present it in conferences to share results. Okay? This is just a model to show how research actually influences you as a person. You have a teacher conducting an action research. Okay? Basically, it improves student achievement, but in turn, it transforms your mind, it transforms your attitude. Always remember that that the evidence of learning is a change of attitude, is a change of practice. If you have not changed anything, then you're not learning at all. Learning can be, yes, on the level of like cerebral level, like just on the head, but it must transcend. Okay, it must transcend overhead. Like you have to put into practice what you've learned. And actual research helps you a lot as a teacher. It informs your practice, okay? It transforms your attitude, basically your practice, and eventually helps improve student achievement. And I am almost done. These are the last portion, thoughts and action research, just a caveat. I'll just skip some of these, maybe. Here. Working in collegial group supported by leaders who nurture the development of teacher researchers provides a sanctuary for support and encouragement. It's very important that in an institution, you have your group, okay? A group where you can share your sentiments, your claims, your frustrations, your victories inside the classrooms. They are learning avenues to get ideas from that can help you a lot in your own classroom as well. You see, you need to support one another. That's how you grow. Um, Here are some of the thoughts. When a teacher knows whether and why the teaching is effective, I think the teacher will be a happier teacher, really. Exactly. Because you know what makes you an effective teacher, and we all love to be an effective teacher, right? The advantage of teacher research is that it brings teacher learning and teaching really close together. Teaching and learning exactly. Because you'll be looking into how they learn. Okay, you'll be looking into how you can improve your practice. It's good to understand what struggles the students have during the lesson itself, and how to assist them. Yeah, it's always good to know that. I always believe that without knowledge comes uncertainty. Really, because you know what you're going to do, right? But if you know what you're doing, you reflect on what your students are doing, how they can probably perform well, then you are at least a 90% certain that you can help your students. But if you didn't know who they are, who your students are, and you didn't know who you are, you didn't know your practices, how you perform, basically, knowledge is uncertain. There is a need for teachers to think of themselves as researchers, but not necessarily in the mold of university-based or scholarly researchers. All right? So we have, I know that later on, especially those who are already in the service, you've gone through thesis, dissertation, these are all body activities. And I wish that we take that out of our mind and we do action research. The more you think of action research as that, like you did in your thesis and dissertation, you can never do an action research, because the fear is there, the feeling of like being so taxing is there. But you have to take what you've learned in doing your thesis, masters, but please, in terms of practice, of connecting theory and practice, it's way different. Okay, it's way different. So you can do better actually, because you have your knowledge, you have your experience, and you just have to tailor them to tailor fit them, okay, in doing an action research. All right. So as I end, let me share with you about this particular quotation from McNiff and Whitehead. McNiff and Whitehead are figures in action research. They say that action researchers aim to investigate their practice with a view to improving it. That's very clear. Action researchers, we teachers, aim to investigate our practice with a view of improving it, because we want to improve what we're doing. They aim for new beginnings. You see, that is very emotional. We aim for new beginnings. Why it's emotional? Because sometimes we don't want change. We don't want we don't want change, because a lot of change is what? Pain, right? We're going out of our comfort zone. We're going out of our comfort zone.
Bano daw yung mga braso, yung mga paa.
If we go out of our comfort zone, there are discomforts. Okay? And we don't like discomforts. The idea of closure is transformed into the idea of one state metamorphosing into another. And like the idea, the word metamorphosis, metamorphosing, transformation from one state to another state. And when we do action research, since the aim of action research is to improve our practice, we can actually transform ourselves from being a novice researcher, from being a neophyte teacher, to become an expert teacher. You know that? Because even if we graduated cum laude, cum laude, with Latin honors, you may have maybe intellectually giant, full of theories, full of concepts, but it's way different when you are already inside the classroom. It's way different. You still need to have practice. Well, theory will help you a lot. Congratulations. But putting your theories into practice would be way different. Okay, would be way different. In reality, change is understood as people improving learning to improve practice. This is very meaningful. You see, change is understood as people improving learning to improve practice. My point is that if we must change, Okay, if we must improve, okay, we must change. And if we must change, we must embrace discomfort. It's always like that. You cannot expect to improve yourself without feeling certain level of discomfort. If you don't like discomfort, you will never change. This is a metaphor of the metamorphosis, something, the process of how just a simple caterpillar metamorphosing, transforming into a very, a wonderful, wondrous, highly capacitated butterfly. And that can be taken to you. As you do action research, you'll know more about yourself. You'll be able to become who you are. You'll be able to contribute practically to the solution of the problem. And it's always like that. Change is inevitable. Again, if you want to improve, if you must improve, you must change. And if you must change, you must embrace discomfort. And do you think the process of transformation from a very simple caterpillar to this wonderful butterfly is easy? Basically, it's not. And I think I think Dr. Gary can heavily attest to that. Do you think transformation from just simple classroom teacher to being a president easy? Basically not. But then he must embrace he must embrace what discomfort, because he must improve. He must improve, and he must change. Well, without the data, you're just another person with an opinion, and the next time you teacher say something, you know what you're going to do. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for that very Rex Lee, for that very insightful, informative discussion you have with the topic fundamentals of active research. Right, a virtual applause, please, for Dr. Lee. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, I think we still have time. We still have plenty of time for question and answer. So I would like to ask the students, if you have some questions, you can use the raise hand button so that you can ask your question, or you can chat your question in the chat space. Are there any questions, clarifications, considering that you are still doing your research, finalizing your research, your output for your research perhaps? You'd like to ask something? I would like to ask who among you here have used the action research or doing action research? Meron ba? Like action research dito?
Wala sila action research this semester, pero they will be required to make their action research during practical. Sir Eric?
Yes, sir. Sir Gary had message here that all BN students now, Sir Bench, are doing action research.
Yeah, Sir Ed. Kasi I think sa curriculum nila yan, sa new curriculum ng BEd, BEd students will conduct action research. But I think gumawa na yan sila ng action research last time. I think yung teacher nila is si Sir Lariba. Tama ba ako mga BEd students? So you can also ask questions and clarification to Doc Lim so that ma-clarify ninyo yung inyong gustong itanong, and clarification, of course, for your doing your action research.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Lagansera. So, BEd students, would you like to ask something, or would you like to share something from your experience as action researchers? Ako personally, I was not able to do an action research before. But the idea is nothing new to me kasi nga it has been taught to us. Yun na nga, wala lang na practice. Alright, so BEd students, would you like to share something? Or how about the other students coming from different majors, the other majors, social studies? You like to ask something?
Bitaw, pwede na kayo Bisaya, ha?
Yes, sir. Basig ano sila, sir. Or perhaps our speaker, merong question, sir. Dr. Lim. I think we have one message here. Yes, Arin. You like to ask something, Medjay?
Sige kung tanaw sa orasan ba sa speaker. Nganong alas
I would like to hear the
2
experiences of RBH students and how they had conducted
Kuan na
their
day ni
action
ka ng
research.
background.
Kasi action research is quite interesting. Yes? What's this, please? Medjay? Hello? Choppy ka po.
Timing pag pagka anak niya wala ni
Yeah, I
sugod
would
kay
like to,
ako.
ano na lang, sir, I'd like to ask something if it's okay. Kasi usually we do action research in the context of problems inside the classroom. Yeah. Right? Later na lang we will cater Miss Sarin. So go ahead. Sarin, just chat your question na lang in the chat space. Sir, going back to my question, we usually do action research in the context of problems that arises inside the classroom. But since we are doing distant learning and we do not really go into the classroom on the classes, what possible topics, sir, would you suggest for possible action research in the new normal modality?
That's true. That's a very good question. Well, since we have also introduced many teaching techniques to enhance, for example, engagement with our students in the new normal, so that's a very good avenue to do action research. For example, the incorporation of different technologies, Wakelet, for example, the use of Edmodo as a learning management system, the use, for example, in my case, in currently conducting an action research because that's a requirement if you will be in the public school. As part of the intervention, I use Facebook as an alternative learning management system. So you see that can be a good avenue for an action research, looking into the perceptions of students, how they perceive the use of Facebook as an alternative learning management system, because originally Facebook is not intended as an LMS. But here, in DepEd, DepEd has no official LMS, and teachers are now looking for an alternative. And to me, personally, I find Facebook as an alternative learning management system. However, it's just my feeling. I do not have yet the data, the proof that this actually can also help my students manage their learning. So that's what I am actually studying right now. Like, it's a mixture of quantity and quality data, where qualitatively I'll be interviewing them, of course, which is the use of Zoom, the use of Google Meet, yes, we have that. And quantitatively, because I look at the use of the Facebook as a learning management system through the lens of technology acceptance model. We have the perceived ease of use, the intention to use, and we have the other one because there are the indicators so far based on my in literature. That's so quantitatively they're answering just questions relative to that model, how they perceive the use of Facebook as a learning management system. Well, as simple as that, as simple as that. There's so many. Because this new normal, it opens a lot of firsts. Lahat ng mga first, ang daming first. Okay? Yung mga first na yan, kailangan nating i-examine kung relevant ba to, kung effective ba to, especially with the use of technology. Especially now in public school, ang dami. Imagine they're using radio-based instruction. Is radio-based instruction really promotes a learning? among our, my goodness, mga ano na to, mga kindergarten, mga elementary, radio-based learning, pero wala namang choice, just to, as part of the continuity plan of DepEd. But the question is that really effective? We're not looking at, until now, we do not have the data as to how effective is this kind of modality. But DepEd is really, like very proud that education continues despite lockdowns and community, closures. But then again, the question is this really effective? Especially that printed modular or completed modular that they're just receiving modules. The very question there is how can we probably engage them in the learning process? Okay, that despite just receiving modules, how can we, engage them? Ano kayong pwede nating magawa? Aside from just giving modules. So do you think these are not good avenues for an action research? These are good avenues for action research. Imagine this is a local problem that you can probably contribute to the solution. That if you would like to be part of the solution. Kung nais na ang the use of research. Yeah. Madami mga social medias ngayon na ginagamit na alternative learning system. WhatsApp, for example, use of YouTube, di ba? As, kasi kung gamit tayo ng YouTube, there can also be tawag doon, yung flip classroom something. Or there's concept on flip classroom. And we use videos to supplement our discussion. We're not there. It's still asynchronous. Okay, flip classroom, where we put their videos for them to learn, and something like that. And looking into its advantages and disadvantages, and looking into the level of comfort among our students. Because although at the onset, at the surface, we know that students are using Facebook, but there are still those students who do not like using Facebook as a learning management system because they feel that it's very distracting. And instead of looking into right there and then in the materials, they're tempted to browse over, their timelines, and we love that. And in fact, personally, I consider Facebook as highly unproductive. That's why, yes, I have my Facebook, I have my Messenger, but most of the time, I just click once on my Facebook, look at the My Days and all, but I usually don't browse. Because if I browse, goodness, like, okay, I spend the rest of my time browsing Facebook. So yes, I do my day. Yeah, just I do my day, just for others to see what I'm doing, but not for me to see what they're doing. Something like that. Because again, I feel like doing Facebook is very unproductive, especially if you're already a teacher, you have your job, you have a lot of workloads. Facebook is, to me, especially when you are in the workplace, is not advisable. Yeah, you can do Facebook, it should be with outside your 8 hours, which is difficult to control. It's really about self-control, It's really about it's really about self-control. Your agency as a professional doing Facebook within school hours. Yes, sir, try na to yeah, that's my take on that, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Actually, we just realized that we also use Facebook group page for our online learning since we do not have the LMS in our institution. Diba, Sir Gary? Dr. Gary, perhaps we can have this one as an action research. And also, our other faculties are using different online platforms to deliver instruction, not only Facebook, but Facebook Meet. Others are also using ano ba yun, gamit na iba? Zoom and Google Classroom. That's it. So perhaps you can do an action research on that. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for that input and for that idea. Perhaps you can also use that one. All right. So any question? Sir, we have some question here coming from, actually not a question, coming from Sir Benji Duy. Can we have sample templates, sir, for action research?
Okay. Yeah. Can we have, is it now, right now?
Perhaps later.
Yeah, template of action research, same with other types of research, is really institutional in nature. But you can find templates in action research published journals. Actually, I have downloaded some of the examples of action research published by Sage. This is very nice. But as yeah, we have a template I can give that, but this is not true to all. This is not absolute. Okay, this is not absolute. You can always design your own template for an action research. Again, that's part of an academic freedom. You know, for as long as the template follows the logical process of the scientific method, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But basically, just to give you an idea, this is an academic write-up. So basically, it follows with the usual template, the usual parts, the introduction. Okay, you have the review of related literature, the methodology, and yeah, the results, the discussion, and you will have the implications. And sometimes even Sage promotes a conclusion as the last. But kaya lang yung conclusion, not so conclusive, but they still use the term conclusion. Meaning the conclusion is based on still the findings, no? Hindi pa rin siya extensive, not extended to other application. But conclusion can still be made. Again, it's a matter of terminology and it's a matter of ano lang talaga, ruling in a journal or in your school. But if you're going to ask me, conclusion would be not so much of, not so appropriate. Not unless if you do large scale action research. For example, in the SAL, action research is being used as a dissertation. Okay, so they can make use of conclusion. But if you'll just have a classroom-based research, application of the findings is more appropriate. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng findings na ito? Given the context that you have, given the findings that you have, and given the samples that you have. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for that input. All right. So, any other questions coming from the students? Yeah, we have here, sir. I'd like to read. Can you give us tips, sir? This question comes from Michelle, sir, from BSN Social Studies. The question reads, can you give us tips, sir, Rex, on how can we effectively conduct action research, especially in this new modality, given that there are so many restrictions needed to be done, and there's in great need to cope with social media platforms, and yet there are still some who are still overwhelmed with the traditional.
Yeah, that's really true. That's another issue. My action research as a student, it's about, since alam naman natin na we do action research because we would like to inform our practice. And since you are still a pre-service teachers, pre-service pa naman, no? And I assume you're not yet teaching, parang hindi pa naman, yung practicum talaga. So, action research in your end, since pre-service pa naman kayo, maybe exploratory in nature. Not necessarily yung mag-test kayo, interventional, kasi yun yung expected natin. Kasi kapag action research, interventional, na for example, you'll be choosing a particular intervention and you'll be testing whether this intervention is appropriate or not. So in your case, it can be more or less exploratory in nature. Like you'll be looking into how you can probably improve your learning given this distance online education. That can be a good action research. How can you probably improve yourself? Okay, how can you probably improve yourself? Okay, as a student in this online learning education. As to the conduct, well, that's purely qualitative because it's exploratory in nature. So you can just do an interview, okay? Interview with your colleagues, okay? Looking at it and talking about how you can, okay, probably improve your learning given this online setup. Of course, considering your program, okay, considering your course, because it could be that your course is inclined to like use of manipulations, na kailangan talaga may laboratory, and how are you going to find effective learning if you did not have the laboratory, if you're just in school, something like that. So that's a good action research, which later on part of the reflections are realizations of the things you should have done and you could do, all right, given that situation. Good morning, sir. Can you give us an advice how we can conduct action research now that we're using modular learning as an alternative delivery mode of instruction? You're using modular learning. Yeah, modular learning. Yeah, alternative mode. Yes, now I understand. Modular learning, because what inside my head is that modular is printed. No, modular learning can be printed, can also be online. The one that I just told you, that you can just do a Google meeting and simply talk about what's going on, okay, with you as students. Yun naman yung practice ninyo. Wala naman yung ibang pwedeng gagawin. Unlike kapag teachers na talaga kayo, you can have your own classroom and you can do a lot of things which are good avenues for action research. But since you are still pre-service teachers, nag-aaral pa, usually exploratory muna. Okay? Just to add more understanding of what you can probably do, what's going on in your education right now. Yes, Ms. Andre. Yeah.
Alright, thank you so much, sir, for that very insightful answer. So I hope clear na sa part sa students, no? Again, you can do exploratory action research. Thank you so much, Dr. Lim. We have here another question, sir. Can you give examples what would be the possible research topic na pwede namin conduct action research aside from problems in education? I think she's referring to more social issues, perhaps.
I'd like to suggest to just focus in the classroom, to just focus in the practice. This you cannot do. I mean, it would be very ambitious to do an emancipatory action research as a student. I'm not saying that you cannot do. What I'm saying is that you have so much problems in your backyard. You have so much problems in your front yard. Why not focus on it first? Okay, why not focus on it first? Yeah, I understand that you like to explore more, that's what we like. But okay, this is something unique. I am the only person proposing this. Okay, wow, something like that. But but we have to always go back to where we are, Yeah, maganda naman yan. Pero ang isa-suggest ko talaga, to begin on it, and you have to check on the rigor, on the validity of conducting research, because to me, as pre-service teachers, as still learning new file, it's not much more on the extensiveness of the study, not much more on the complexity of the study, but more on how you do it. The process of doing it is much more important than on the scope of the problem. Okay? Kasi paano man yan, ang dami mo lang ginagawa, masyadong malaki yung extensive, masyadong malaki yung problem mo na pinag-aralan mo. But then hindi naman tama yung methodology mo. Hindi naman maganda ang pagka-analyze, hindi naman thorough yung data analysis, hindi naman na-satisfy yung concept of triangulation. So it's good to begin with small, it's good to begin with your front yard, and from your success, that feeling of success that you have, doing small things, you will be carrying that over in doing big things, in doing large-scale action research later on when appropriate time comes, especially when you will become a teacher yourself, because you all have the facility, you all have the avenues to do it. That's really my point, okay? That's really my point. Pero ayoko magbigay ng mga kahit ano lang, no? Again, let's just focus muna doon sa practice natin kung saan tayo ngayon, kasi yun naman yung purpose ng action research, to basically improve our practice, to eventually improve performance or practice of the stakeholders as well, which in our case, students as our stakeholders.
Alright, thank you so much, Dr. Lim, for that practical advice. Right, so we have to focus first on our classrooms, in our context as educators, before we go out to the issues outside our classroom. Thank you so much, Dr. Lim, for that input. Alright, so I think that's it. Any other questions? Wala na. How about you, Dr. Lim? Do you have questions? Wala na, sir. Sir, I would like to clarify, last na lang dun, sir. You mentioned earlier that you're doing action research. Is it possible to do action research during a mixed method pala?
Yeah,
Or
mixed methods but not methodology. Kasi iba yung mixed methodology sa mixed methods. We do mixed methods in action research given that we collect quantity data and we collect quality data because we would like to better understand the problem. So we can better understand the problem if we have quality data and quantity data, but not necessarily doing the mixed methodology. Kasi pag sabihin natin mixed methodology, we'll be doing big convergent parallel, exploratory sequential, something like that. That's another story. But sabihin natin mixed methods, we just take the methods, the way we analyze quantity, the way we analyze quality, but not necessarily fully integrating them as the heart of mixed methodology. Kasi pag mixed methodology, there must be an integration. Like, ang quality data ba, ang quantity data ba, nag-merge ba sila? Ang quality data, nag-quantity data ba, nag-ano ba siya? Kasi may mga pwede merging, diverging yung result, yung mga ganon. You don't need to reach that kind of level. So you can do mixed methods, but not necessarily methodology. Kasi iba yung methodology sa method.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So it's possible pala, sir, to have...
Exactly, and that's highly encouraged. Because if you just simply do qualitative, purely qualitative action research, there are a lot of limitations. But if you collect, you interview, you collect like assessment sa mga bata, yung kanilang mga scores, isn't it great that you're able to triangulate, confirm their assessment results with their feelings, with their opinions, with their sentiments, with your quiz? Kaya nga pala ganito yung kanilang score kasi sabi nila masyadong mahirap, sir, kasi masyadong mahirap nagpa-quiz at 30 items, 10 minutes lang. Yung kanilang mga sentiments, di ba mas maganda talaga kapag you have both quantity and quality data, but it's not mixed methodology. We just take quality data and quantity data, but it's an action research.
Pero ano, sir, does it really require statistical treatment? Meron siyang one thing apart.
Very simple. Very basic. Like you can just do the what do you call this? Descriptive statistics, like you have the mean, the median, the mode, because you can do averaging. As simple as that. We don't need complex statistical tools. Like you'll do comparing. Like mag-pre-test and post-test ka. No? Tingnan mo doon yung score ng mga bata without the intervention. Nag-intervention ka, tingnan mo naman kung ano yung kanilang performance after the intervention. So you'll just do t-test. Or maybe mag-correlate. It is very basic na statistical tools which everybody, I believe everybody knows about it, no? Will it be using yung mga mutation, moderation, social equation, path analysis and all, it's not relevant. It's not relevant.
Thank you so much, sir, for that input. So I guess we can also have action research on the use of Facebook, sir, Yari, no? And then we will have mixed method on that perhaps next school year. Right, so thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for your very insightful discussion and for sharing with us your practical tips on how to conduct action research, especially now that we are under the new normal learning modality. All right, so I would like to request our technical team to present the certificate of recognition to our guest speaker. Alright, so let me read the citation. College of Arts, Sciences and Technology, LS Sarmiento Senior Street, Poblacion, Moncayo, Davao de Oro. Certificate of recognition is awarded to our guest speaker in grateful appreciation and recognition of his lovely thoughts, brilliant ideas, and relevant experiences as resource speaker during the webinar series 10 entitled Fundamentals of Action Research held on November 26, 2021 via Zoom and Facebook Live platform. Given this 26th day of November 2021 via Zoom and Facebook Live platforms, signed Dr. Karen Chaser B. Makiling, Academic Program Head, Teacher Education, signed Dr. Gary P. Lagachera, College Administrator. Again, certificate of recognition is awarded to Dr. Rex A. Lee. Virtual applause, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much once again, Dr. Lee, for that very helpful and informative discussion again on the fundamentals of action research. All right, so at this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, to formally close our webinar series 10, I would like to call on Mr. Romnick Campania, BSN Social Studies Representative, for his closing message.
To our college president, Dr. Gary P. Lagatiera, to the Program Head of the Teachers Education Department, Dr. Karen Chaser B. Makiling, to our plenary speaker, Dr. Rex A. Lim, the faculty of Davao City National High School, to the BSN Students Teacher Supervisor, Mr. Erap L. Ordeneza, to the BEN Students Teacher Supervisor, Mr. Venji Doydoy, to the Master of Ceremony, Mr. Teresito R. de las Reyes, and to all the students who are present today, once again, good morning. I would like to express my deepest gratitude and appreciation to our plenary speaker in the webinar series 10, who generously shared his knowledge to us this morning. Thank you, Dr. Lim, for such an insightful and inspiring discussion about the fundamental action of research. It will be a great help to all of us as future educators. I would like also to take this opportunity to thank the Committee on Visual Technicalities, the BEN, SSA and B, the Committee on E-Certificate, the BEN A and B, the Program Committee, which is the Math Department, the Narrative Reports, the English Department, and to all the class president and treasurer in each section. Thank you so much for your active support and help to make this event successful. Congratulations to all of us and Laban Future Educator. God. Congratulations to all of us and Laban Future Educator. God.
God bless. Naputol din ang God bless.
Alright, thank you so much, Mr. Romney
Ibalik
Campania,
na
for that
putol.
wonderful closing remarks. No, laban lang dyan, future educators. Alright? Before we end, I would like to request our technical team to
Di na ko open, oy.
have our customary pictorials. Requesting our technical team to facilitate our customary pictorials.
4 pages ko po, sir.
Alright?